You've landed on The Substance, a podcast aimed at being biblical, thoughtful, and human. Join us each week as we engage the culture without the culture war. My name's Vincent Edwards, and I'm here with my friends and co-hosts, Trevor Aiken.
Howdy, howdy.
And Philip Marinello.
Hey, everybody. Trevor's over here appropriating your howdy because now he's a Texan.
That's right.
It's all good.
It's not appropriation when you're in the culture, though.
You've been in the culture for 2 weeks.
Oh, well, sure. Fair. Guilty as charged.
And today we have a special guest. Joining us today is artist Josh Tiessen.
Fine artist.
Yes.
Painter extraordinaire. And I was looking at the email he sent us. Associate Living Master, Josh Tiessen.
Wow.
That's how I would be introducing myself. I love that. For those of us who are Philistines and don't understand the fine art world, what is an associate living master?
Sure. So yeah, I am pretty young, admittedly, to have that title, and I know it takes decades to really become a master. Basically, I was given this title by the Art Renewal Center. It's like the leading world organization for classical realism. So it was a huge honor, and quite cool when I guess all the time you put into something gets recognized like that.
Heck yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's absolutely how I would be signing my emails if I was working.
We're not even apprentices yet. And it's like, this guy over here is a living master. That's awesome.
Man. Well, all right, Josh, I definitely want to get into the substance of what you do, because your art has a lot of meaning behind it and a lot of really interesting discussions that it could bring up. Let's talk about the art itself in your story. Like you just said, you're pretty young to have some of the accomplishments and letters after your name and some of the gallery openings that you've done. Like, how did Josh Tiessen, Associate Living Master, start? What's your art biography?
Well, I was not born into an artistic family per se. My parents were actually missionaries. My dad is a minister. And they were professors overseas, where I was born in Russia. And so training, young ministers as the country was opening up. And I had a Russian nanny who did lots of arts and crafts with me there. And that's really where my creativity began. And when we returned home to Canada, I was later discovered when I was 9 years old at a children's club, and an old elderly artist invited me over to her studio and began passing on to me her skills in chalk pastel realism, and booked me for my first art exhibition at 11 years old. And
Wow. All right.
Doing a lot of wildlife and nature scenes, like my mentor, who that was her specialty.
Mm-hmm.
And so many things that we could dive off of from there. But thinking about how important art was and how you kind of dove into art, not coming from artistic background, do you feel like there was a part of you that was, I don't know, filling a gap?
Well, I was also interested in other things. Like as a preteen, I played basketball, and I also dabbled in photography and graphic design. But I seemed to always return to art, and I did it really just for the pure joy and fun. And it wasn't really something I thought I could necessarily make a career. Eventually, people outside of my parents saw the raw talent and helped develop it. But it became, apparent after I was mentored under this master wildlife artist, Robert Bateman, that, I potentially could make a career of this. And I think that was natural, because I've never really felt like it has been a job. It has been like really, really fulfilling. And I often say that art is kind of my way of processing the world in kind of like a devotional, spiritual manner. And so I feel art is really the best way that I explore the big ideas of life.
Wow, that's incredible. You mentioned just recently about how your work doesn't really feel like a job.
That's a dream, right?
Yeah. Talk to us about that processing, because I know in today's society, oftentimes if you can't make money from it, you either have to make your gift or your talent something that gets you money, or you
Mhm.
just abandon the talent in order to make sure that you're living, have a roof over your head, things like that. So talk to us about that relationship for you to be able to pursue that, but still be able to pursue that in a way where it's passionate rather
Yeah.
than just work.
He's up in Canada, so things I imagine are, what would you say? You guys emphasize and fund and value the arts kind of in a different way than we do, right?
No, for sure. Yeah, there are a lot of art grants and funding. I'll be honest, I've never received any myself.
Oh.
Although I am a Canadian, I feel though I have been pretty well accepted in the US art market. Like most of the galleries that I show with now are all American galleries, so they seem to, also resonate with my work. But yeah, it's something I'm fortunate to be able to do what I love, to be able to live in a place where there's lots of nature as inspiration for me. So but I love traveling down to the States and get lots of inspiration down there too.
You've mentioned that it was kind of the realism center that has found you, and your work is kind of founded in realism. Can you talk a little bit about, I don't want to say the market because it almost sounds wrong, for art, but I'm missing the whatever the actual term is, but like how realism sits in the modern art world. Like I feel like
Hmm.
a lot of art or artistic people you see out there, it's like realism's almost like this side thing, or
Hmm.
the people who are realism, end up in graphic design or something like that. Maybe I'm just assessing that wrong, but how would you
Hmm.
assess where realism sits today in 2021 in the art world?
Yeah, Trevor, that's an insightful because it is true that realism has, in some way, taken a backseat, especially in 20th century art, moving towards more non-representational styles of art, like abstract expressionism, minimalism. But I mean, nowadays, like abstract art is a style that's been around for 70 years. So actually, in the last couple of decades, there's been a real return towards representational realism, kind of a new surrealism movement as well, where
Hmm.
I found like some of the New York and LA galleries that I show with are really drawn to. So I kind of look at my work as sort of taking the best of the traditions of the art masters and technique and skill, but then also innovation in contemporary art, and kind of fusing those two together. And also, like my work relates to relevant issues in our postmodern world. But there is definitely a renewed interest in realism, and
Awesome.
hyper realism is kind of the style especially talking about.
I have a process question that just kind of occurred to me, a little nerdy. So you shared in your book sometimes, and then online sometimes, like how long these large pieces take you. So hundreds of hours go into a painting. How do you plan your days and weeks when so many days and weeks go into these pieces?
The paintings take years to develop in sketchbooks before I
Hmm.
actually begin painting. So I have a pretty good idea going into the work because I spend so much time doing preliminary sketches and photography and digital color studies. When I actually get to the painting process, I work on one painting at a time,
Hmm.
and I try to spend around 8 to 10 hours a day on that one. And I kind of have a pretty systematic kind of way of creating the works, and they can range between a few hundred hours to up to 1,700 hours.
Wow.
And so it is time consuming, but
That's
yeah, I love
that's
the
some
process.
days.
Yeah.
What scales that work? Is it just literally the size of the work itself, or intricacy, or layers?
Yeah, really all of the above. Like the complexity, the scale. Sometimes smaller paintings can take almost just as long, just because it's just condensed detail. So, architecture
Hmm.
takes a long time, um, but that's the process. That's kind of what I thrive on.
So, Josh, we reached out to the listeners to get some questions, and one week I resonate with kind of just the curiosity and the interest behind this question. you started selling paintings when you were 11, which is pretty wild. But when did you really know and feel like, okay, I am good at this, I want to do this? People talk about finding their calling or their giftedness. Like, you are clearly very gifted. What was the process of kind of accepting that? Was it easy? Was it kind of scary? Was it challenging? Like, how did that go for you?
It's a good question. It was a gradual progress for sure, and development from a hobby into a career. But say when I graduated from high school when I was 16 and really went into art full time, and I was able to make a full time living. Of course, every parent's nightmare is having a starving artist as a son. um, and my parents were very, practically minded too. And so I really try my best to understand the whole business side of running a career in the arts, which is important. And so it just kind of gradually developed when, I was able at 16 to show my work in the National Gallery, and then of Canada, and then various international guilds in the US that I thought, maybe, this could really develop. And I also always felt a strong calling from God to pursue something in the arts. I felt that I had a gifting for that. And my parents being in ministry really instilled in me, you don't do anything just to make a lot of money. And so it's kind of funny how the arts are you don't go in to make your millions. And so they always wanted us, my brother and me, he's a musician, to really follow our passion. And they've also really helped me and assisted me in order to really make this a possibility.
Don't want to make this all about him, but I was going to ask you a question or two. I've not yet listened through the soundtrack in its entirety, but along with the release of the gallery edition of Streams in the Wasteland, there's also a soundtrack totally put together by your brother Zach. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So last fall, we got the idea of collaborating on this project. I had this body of work called Streams in the Wasteland, and we had collaborated before, like when I've done time-lapse videos and he provided the music, or I provided the art for his album artwork. And he had been getting into like movie soundtrack scoring.
I saw some of the people who gave the little blurbs on the soundtrack. I was like, these are some legit names, and your brother is also very young. Like, I was like, he's got to be one of the things even said, like, I can't wait to have him work on our movies. I was like, good night. Y'all are like some studs running Canada up there, man.
It's kind of funny. So my dad's cousins are Hollywood screenwriters, and they wrote the Conjuring films, if you're familiar with those.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Are those your dad's cousins?
Yeah. So they're, very, into my brother's music. They connected him with a film composer in Toronto, and so my brother has studied composing. So it was kind of like this was the first project where he would like complete an actual score to go not with a movie but with a painting series. And so it was a fun project where basically each painting has its own song.
That's amazing.
Wow. Yeah.
And I mean, I dabble. I'm a big appreciator of the arts. I would love to make some things, God willing, before my time is done. But it's just so incredible to me, people who like clearly like really, really have it. And I mean, the task of, it's an incredible thing to appreciate and to experience when the music complements the image so much. But when I feel like it's different in a film than in a still painting. So to create like a full body of like a full piece of music to go with just visual, like a painting, is just kind of
I'd love to know,
insane talent to me.
I'd love to know more too about that process, because that just creating a multi-sensory aesthetic experience like that, right? How do you do that? I mean, there's already so much symbolism, so many layers going into the painting. I mean, there's the color, the tone of it, and then
Even the
to have someone
presentation,
take
like
that and then, all right, here's how. And I'm thinking about even just really practical things like, oh, how long is this song? If I,
Yeah.
I do it too short. Is it too short for them to like dwell on the painting while they're listening to it? Like, is it meant to be listened in that way? I don't know. Like, wow. Walk me
Yeah.
through your process some.
Definitely, those were all considerations that we had, and Zach specifically tried to make all the songs match the duration it would take to read the painting story and look at the work, and also he really wanted to emphasize the emotional aspect of the works and also the geographic locations of the paintings. Because the paintings span a wide array of locations from the American Southwest to Asian Africa. And so he picked up on musical instruments from that area, and he also then he composed the music and then had I think about 16 musicians from around the world who recorded for him.
Wow.
Like he had like a cello player from Israel who was actually recording while bombs were flying overhead.
Wow.
And so it was just wild to be working on this project through such a crazy time in world history this past year with the pandemic. And so basically, the CD, I find it is really like an extension of the narrative of the painting stories. And I think it creates a multidisciplinary experience that is similar to a film, but a little bit different because you get to slow down on one still image and kind of take more of a contemplative approach and listen to the music. And so it's been a neat experience collaborating with your brother.
Wow. Yeah.
That's amazing. So talk to us about the title of the book called Streams in the Wasteland. Talk to us about the meaning behind that title.
Especially in how you found some, I don't know, synonymism with T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland.
Yeah, that's great that you picked up on that. So about 6 years ago, I started working on this painting series, and I was reading passages in Isaiah that really stood out to me of animals and abandoned spaces, and specifically the line in Isaiah chapter 43, where Isaiah records the words of the Lord saying that the wild animals honor me, the jackals and the owls, because I provide water in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland for my chosen people, yet you have not wearied yourselves for me, Israel. And so there's this juxtaposition, this contrast between the animals bringing honor to the Creator and even doing his bidding in wayward nations who have nature reclaiming these civilizations, contrasted with people's moral unfaithfulness. And so I thought this was an interesting theme that could be applied to a painting series. I all of a sudden got all these ideas for animals in various abandoned places around the world throughout history. And later on, I realized that T.S. Eliot had this poem called The Wasteland, which also coincides with this idea of civilizations being frail and eventually collapsing. And this was around World War One and Two, and him as a poet really thinking about how ultimately human civilizations collapse because they're based on human power and not relying on God the Creator. And so that really was the catalyst for the entire painting series.
Wow.
Great.
It's just not just animals and cool pictures.
Yeah.
It's depth to that.
And to see all of the theological contemplation that's going on underneath, and you write really forthrightly about that in your book. Talk to us a little bit, because we've talked about the earth, you've talked about human power being, kind of the corrupting thing, and then civilizations getting reclaimed by nature that will give praise to God. And you have a lot of conservationism resources in here. And so a lot of reflection on how our rebellion against God shows up in the way we treat the rest of his creation. I wonder if you could interact with some of these principles like that people have kind of taken seemingly from the Bible of we have dominion, like this dominionism that it's ours to kind of rise and conquer and
Use, really
take
exploit.
and use, and we can kind of just do this because we're, you know, king of the hill in a way, and kind of some of that thinking that says that. As you've contemplated that and read and thought theologically, how would you interact with those kind of thoughts and arguments from Genesis?
Wow, that's a great question. I was really fortunate to be able to study eco-theology and creation care in my post-secondary studies, and basically a lot of it is based in the reference from Genesis 1 and 2, this idea of being made in the image of God. We're given dominion over the earth to multiply and flourish, but often, you know, dominion is interpreted or understood as domination, whereas really Christ is our example of what leadership looks like, which is servant leadership. And so in Genesis 2:15, it talks about how the Lord placed Adam in the garden to steward and protect nature, and then that is what I believe, you know, a command that continues throughout the Old and New Testaments. You even see among the Mosaic law, multiple laws basically protecting the earth's ability to replenish itself through practices like the Sabbath and various farming practices. Sandra Richter, in her book Stewards of Eden, is a place I would really recommend people. She's a biblical scholar who goes into a lot of this. And I was fascinated specifically in the book of Isaiah because what's interesting is that the creation story of the Hebrew people is based on God creating the earth and saying that it's good and very, very good. And later in the Psalms, it says that the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. It's actually not for humans to own, and we are just the ones who are here to be stewards.
Wow.
Contrasted, you know, with the Babylonian creation myths, where, you know, the earth was just like a byproduct of warring gods, and they're really bloodthirsty. And then that kind of goes into how, you know, Babylon, Assyria, they participated in ecocidal practices, basically against their enemies in kind of destroying their vineyards and crops, so that it would cause like generational catastrophe. And so there is this environmental theme throughout Scripture, and even there's many passages in the New Testament of Christ who really relates to animals. He was born in a stable. He started his ministry out in the wilderness with animals, and this kind of connection between Christ, who is this innocent Lamb of God, even and that symbolism is something that I picked up on my final painting this series.
Yeah. I just wanted to give listeners receipts for some of this, because we know we love original sources on this podcast, right? But this is one of my favorite ones you were mentioning about the biblical laws of protection on the environment. And from Deuteronomy 20, verse 19, the second giving the law, Moses says this: when you besiege a city for a long time, making war against it in order to take it, you shall not destroy its trees by wielding an axe against them. You may eat from them, but you shall not cut them down. Are trees in the field human that they should be besieged by you? I just love that. It's just like, duh. The kind of rhetorical question. You're not besieging the trees, man.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, for sure. It's all about, you know, sustainability. And that was like the idea of the Sabbath day, the Sabbath year, the year of Jubilee was to let the animals and land rest so that it would ultimately be sustainable for future generations.
Yeah, and I love that idea of stewardship you brought out too, because a lot of people don't really fully get that. I was thinking about this the other day, about how much we take about private property and how important private property is. it is there in scripture, but people forget that actually Old Testament Israel, like you said, the contract was basically God says, listen, I own the land and I've apportioned it out to you by ethnicity, by tribe. And so you have it in the sense that you're my caretakers for the land. Basically, I bought you out of the house of slavery. And so you're mine. You're my own possession. You're my chosen portion. And so you will now have this land, and I'm allotting it to you. I'm portioning it out and giving it to you as my thing for you, and it's for you alone. It's not yours, actually, to do what you want with it, which is why, like you said in the Jubilee, not only does the land get rest, but also all of the sales transactions revert, and it goes back to that family. Everything stays in the line. So it's not like kind of that libertarian philosophy of like whatever a man encloses and works, is that I think that's mill, right? Like that's his, like that's what it means for someone to have property rights, is if he encloses a property and then works it and tills it. And God says, no, actually it's all mine. And here's what I give out, like at least in the Israel example. I'm not saying that that's necessarily his global plan, but very interesting. If we want to use the principles from the Old Testament, we should really take that full concept and context into account.
It's sad because I talk about in the book that there are these kind of three philosophical camps, and one that you've kind of articulated would be kind of the anthropocentric or human-centric view that we own the earth and that we can basically exploit it, that it is has infinite resources, but yet really we know we reap what we sow. And even Isaiah talks about woe to you who build house to house, who overdevelop. And it can be really like the Enlightenment really influenced this idea, this concept of the mechanistic universe, which was then kind of disconnected from morals and was basically just here for our benefit. And that's the school of thought of utilitarianism. But then in Christian circles, really this kind of dualism, which really developed way back from Plato, this kind of Gnosticism that the physical world is bad and we need to escape to the immaterial and go to heaven when we die, which isn't necessarily bad, but really what I also talk in the book about is that we look forward to the future restoration of the new heavens and the new earth. But yet at the same time, we work out our reconciliation to creation, both now in the present.
Yeah, I love that because without that second piece, it almost becomes a temporal dualism, right? Not where like the physical and spiritual, but like versus the now, which we see, and the later, so that you have Christians who almost like, well, the now is all going to burn anyway, so we can't really kill it before God's time. So whatever we do, it's whatever.
So let's exploit the heck out of it.
And so like the later is the perfect and the spiritual and the good, but like the now is the fallen and the broken and the going to be destroyed and the bad. So whatever,
So it's the purge.
Yeah, which is, has like, but almost not like there's almost like strands of Gnosticism in there, almost, where it's like, oh well, this is all bad, so you can do whatever you want.
I was curious, Josh. We're talking. The majority of the people who listen to The Substance would identify as people of faith, but we also have a decent amount who are not, which we appreciate. I'm curious, what sort of reception have you personally in your work gotten from the religious world and then just from the secular art world? How's it been similar? How's it been different?
Well, it's interesting because there's not really a Christian market for visual art. So
that's telling.
So by necessity, I've always been more or less in the secular field of the art world, and I do kind of cringe calling it the secular field because in reality it's more just a pluralistic area where you really get a whole variety of views. You do have a renewed interest in spirituality and New Age, in the art world. So it's not just a bunch of atheists as some people kind of envision it, or nihilists.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have just found very early on that the quality of my work and the excellence that I endeavored to pursue through my art was really valued. And my work isn't overtly religious on the surface level. And so I find it's a place where people can engage it from a variety of backgrounds. And so many of the people who purchase my art are not Christians. And the gallery owners I've developed relationships with come from a variety of backgrounds. And so I think that is one of the great things about art, is that it transcends a lot of religious and cultural barriers. And I've found that if people are interested, I write stories that go alongside my paintings, and sometimes galleries allow them to be hung by the work, sometimes not. It all depends on sort of their policy that way. But for those who are interested, they can go deeper. And I've found that I've had many really, really interesting conversations with people through my work, talking about religion and faith. And I find even like environmentalism is a real value among secular folks. And I am even part of various conservation efforts and on a conservation board in my area, where I'm happy to link arms with people who don't share my beliefs, but who have a common goal in that regard. And so I hopefully that kind of answers your question.
No, that's good. I'm curious. You mentioned the environmentalism efforts that you're involved in. Have you had much support from the religious world on the environmental side?
It's not as divisive of an issue here in Canada. I've had, maybe there's some apathy towards it among Christians. I do talk in my book that it is quite a tragedy that although Christians have been known for so many great causes throughout history, opening orphanages and schools and hospitals, and helping abolish slavery, etc., that environmentalism has been one of the areas where we've fallen short, and where there's been an unnecessary hostility, where a lot of politics contributes to that kind of polarizing effect. So I find, though, I approach it, I kind of put the politics aside because I'm not necessarily expert on that. And I've donated my art to conservation efforts, but I've found that a lot of religious folk do have an appreciation of nature and the wonder of God's creation. And so try to approach it from that perspective, because as a colleague of mine, Stephen Bauman Prediker, says that we don't care for what we don't already love. And so art has a unique role in helping inspire, our affections towards something. And in my case, nature and animals. And that's what hopefully inspires action. And that hopefully people could see that in my work in a way that isn't browbeating or guilt-inducing or legalistic.
That's good.
Yeah, I'd say not at all. And I mean, you say that the spiritual themes are not beat you over the head. And not to disparage people who create those types of work, or people who like to consume or enjoy those types of work. But I mean, you're not, other than maybe your final piece, the clear religious imagery. If you are already religious and you know these things, it's very apparent. I'd be interested for you to talk just a little about, I think my favorite pieces in here are the "Can These Bones Live" and the "Rise Up" set. And is that the "Rise Up" behind you right there?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So
I know this
amazing.
is bad audio for a podcast right there, but one, I'd like to hear you talk about that set. Also, talk about the decision for the format of Rise Up, because I think that is fascinating.
I'm super curious about that as well. And listeners, if you're curious about this, go look down in the description links. Go purchase Streams in the Wasteland, and then you can pick back up and follow along with a visual.
Or check it
you
out on
gotta get
Josh's
it.
Instagram, because it's a little pricier than some of the other books that we typically promote here, but it's very worth it. I would highly suggest you
Yeah.
guys grab it.
Save up your pennies.
So, Can These Bones Live was a painting I'll just describe since this is audio format, but it's a butterfly monarch flying through a human rib cage skeleton and transforming these dry bones into life. And it was an interpretation of mine of a passage from the prophet Ezekiel, chapter 37, the Valley of Dry Bones. And so I was thinking about this concept of metamorphosis, and in the context that it was written, it was about return of the Israel people to their promised land. And then in the broader context of Scripture, it extends to the great homecoming of the new heavens and the new earth for people who have the people of God who have redeemed hearts. And so that extends into my painting Rise Up, which features a girl in the foreground, a Botswanan born by Rachel girl who was just a fabulous model. And she is rising, and she's part skeleton and part obviously coming to life. And this is the vision of hope that I really wanted to infuse, that we do have this great hope of a restored universe, and not only a restored universe for humans, but also for the animal world. I have 15 monarch butterflies, and if anyone knows that butterflies are in great decline, and it's quite sad, but I hope this painting was a hopeful piece for people to ponder, and also the title of Rising Up against all the evils in this world, like racism, like greed, like exploitation of the earth. And the format of the painting is triangular shaped, and so it is. And then if you look at this painting on my website, it has two doors that open and close. And so this is in the style of an altarpiece frame, which was used throughout the Renaissance in churches. And I really like just that religious framework, because a lot of my subject matter isn't like traditional religious imagery, like biblical scenes and that sort of thing, but taking some of that framework. And I felt like the doors on the altarpiece kind of had sort of an upward motion and kind of looked like wings. So yeah, that was the idea behind it.
Yeah. I've stared at that page and those pages for a while. It's kind of funny. I thought, just because I'm so transfixed by the primary image, I saw on the book you have the piece itself, and then when you flip the page, you get to see some of the detail and then more of your notes. The two smaller folks, I thought those were like, other concept sketches that you could have potentially used. I'm like, no, they're in there too. I'm just so like fixated on the middle that it took me a while looking at that to see those other two on the sides there.
Yeah, they're tiny figures. My dad was the one model for the elderly white-haired man, and then also my Indonesian neighbor. She was a great sport and posed for me as well.
Very nice,
amazing.
That's fantastic.
Talk to us about the concept behind the Academy, because I thought that was very interesting.
Oh, okay. So the Academy depicts two white-handed gibbons, and the one is on a kind of medieval-looking light, and it's the part of the building is covered in ivy, and so it was actually based on a university close to where I live, and so I definitely recognize that there's symbolism of what primates have represented throughout history, kind of the morally base vices. And so I was thinking, okay, the Academy, this could be quite potentially controversial. There was a story that broke out basically at this local university of public figure, Jordan Peterson, and how he was basically kind of yelled off of campus by the students with blow horns, and it was a whole terrible fiasco. And basically, one body of students, the free speech students, asked him to speak on campus. Basically, I was thinking about how the academy has really become a place where intellectualism is narrowing, where it once was a place where a lot of the virtues of free speech and respect for varying opinions was commonplace. But it's my opinion that I see that declining, especially in Ivy League schools. And so the painting was kind of a critique on that, and kind of fits into the broader theme of the painting series, is that all human institutions gradually decline and fail, not just nation states, but even like disciplines like the academy.
Talk a little bit too about, I see a highlight around this clover shape, both in the photo and then the actual shape of the entire thing is this clover as well. And I think that also speaks to a broader theme, the intentionality in the way this art is presented, in the shapes and the framing. So talk a little bit about that. And then
you can tell that you put your years into this.
Yeah. So that was based on like the medieval symbol of the quatrefoil that you find in a lot of Gothic architecture. And so usually the shape of the painting is derived from some element of the subject matter. And so there's a painting of a Asian elephant running out of Hindu temple, and that kind of stereotypical shape what of the Hindu temple was what I used as a shape of painting. So I got tired of rectangles and squares, and just found that they kind of worked against the subject matter oftentimes. And so that was just something I wanted to kind of break out of. Some abstract painters in the past have done non-rectangular shaped paintings, but I thought it would be interesting to incorporate realism with that, and do something that I felt had more kind of relevance to the subject matter.
Yeah, I love that. I love the way that it kind of causes the art to extend outward. It kind of gives less of a boundary to it, like more of a, just the whole, instead of it being a picture, like the way we think of pictures of an art piece, like the entire part of it. And you have Occidental Babylon, and I noticed the very intentional like wood, like kind of weathered wood framing that you had there with like the corbels, and so I was like, wow, that's just amazing.
I've designed a few frames. That one was special, aged wood, and like you said, corbels, and that frame actually picks up on kind of the Western Victorian architecture of the Wild West ghost towns. And so I wanted to really capitalize on the presentation in that way.
Yeah, that and New Sheriff in Town also I thought were just, I really loved the depiction of kind of that time period.
Thank you.
We see kind of a finale in a work that you called Agnus Dei. Talk about that, since it's audio, that description, and just what went into that process, and the thoughts kind of going into the culmination of the finale of the book.
And you can give the dimensions on this bad boy too, just so that the listeners kind of have an idea of the scope of it.
Yeah. It's 105 inches by 65 inches. So it's huge. It's like
massive.
Fills a wall. It's like a kind of a small scale mural almost. So it was a painting that I worked on during the entire pandemic, over 8 months. Wow. And in the painting, the 17 animals from all the other works in the series return for one last finale. And I was really struck by Isaiah chapter 53 about the Lamb of God, Agnus Dei, which is Latin. And Jesus is this prophesied Messiah whom Christians believe fulfills this prophecy concerning him, who was led like a lamb to the slaughter, He did not open his mouth, and this humility and surrender and innocence was something that I really wanted to show through depicting this lamb on an altar, which picks up on the historical theme. Artists like Jan van Eyck and Andre Zerbaran throughout art history painted this motif. But I wanted to also contrast sort of the human-centric bias of a lot of Renaissance paintings, which are only really depicting humans, and if animals are depicted, it's only for allegorical purposes. So all these animals are surrounding the throne, and it also picks up on this larger idea of redemption of all of creation. So the atonement, Christ's substitutionary death on the cross for our sins, is good news not only for humans who accept this gift of grace, but also for animals, I believe, too. So in Romans chapter 8, it talks about all of creation groaning and waiting in eager anticipation for the children of God to be revealed. And really, this is a picture of the hope of resurrection for the natural world. And then we see in the final book of the Bible, Revelation, of all animals, all creatures in the sea and sky and on the earth surrounding the Lamb who was slain. And so in this painting, I wanted to highlight that, animals also are within the cosmic scope of reconciliation. And so this painting can be read, for secular folks with more of like there's an animal rights theme in it, of, the sheep who are cloned and for biomedical experimentation, and also just, of course, like I had mentioned about the ecological crisis of species loss. And but it also is a painting that could be read from Christians' perspective of something that's redemptive and also indicative of the times that we're living in.
I notice in your in some of the text you provide on that second page, you mention the destruction of Christian sacred sites by extremist groups like ISIS. So am I reading correctly that you have included is that the Arabic symbol for infidel in the blood on the altar?
It is. Thanks for picking up on that. So I didn't mention that within this scene is an abandoned Gothic cathedral that is, crumbling, and there's this bleak winter backdrop. And so I picked up on this artist, Caspar David Friedrich, this German romantic painter who painted a lot of abandoned cathedrals and kind of indicative of sort of the post-Christian society that we live in, which on the one hand has a lot to do with spiritual and biblical compromise, I believe, but then there's also this very real reality of persecution of Christians around the world. And the noon symbol, so the Arabic letter N, is what ISIS militants use to brandish the homes and churches of Christians in the Middle East. And so I have that symbol on the altar. And so I wanted to, make also, hopefully a relevant statement for the experience of many believers in the world.
Man, that's powerful.
I think another thing that's just captivating about this that we haven't, I don't believe, had a chance to mention yet is how life, vegetation, flowers budding, like it looks like winter on the edges of this very, very large painting, but emanating from the bloody sacrifice at the altar, there is life springing forth and warmth, and whereas there's very cool colors kind of everywhere else, you really have a lot more warm tones right there at the center.
Yeah, so I was thinking about just the concept of the peaceable kingdom, and I, in the book of Isaiah, you get a lot of these passages of the lion, the wolf and the lamb laying together, and the vegetation, the flowers, the crocus that will bloom as the streams irrigate the wasteland, the desert, and bring new life. And so in the painting, I painted a variety of flowers and plants to hopefully really represent that. And like you said, they're emanating. There's the emanating light that even like the plants and flowers are kind of like drawn to the light that is above the lamb, and the butterfly is directly above the lamb, and that's symbol of the spirit. And so that's also an important aspect of the painting.
Wow. So much to contemplate there.
That's really amazing.
This thing is incredible. Yeah, almost 9 feet tall, and you said 1,700 hours. That's like 200 workdays plus. That's just
that's
that's
lot.
wild.
Yeah, you kind of have to be a little bit crazy.
Well, I also wanted to ask, just for our listeners who are artists who have a talent and want to continue to develop that talent, but might be lacking motivation in those times where you're kind of maybe in a rut or anything like that. How would you encourage other artists out there who for sure have a passion for the art that they do to just keep going and keep that motivation?
Definitely. I often say to artists that it is a lot of hard work and you need help from others. I'm not, a self-made man, so to speak. I've had a lot of help from people. And I think you have to find something that you're passionate about as well, and that you have a real drive and purpose for. I see a lot of artists and creative types, if they're just creating for the social media likes or the sales, it just doesn't really sustain you for very long. You have to have something, I think, deep and abiding, that's bigger than just mere praise. And so that's what I would say, and to really do it for the joy of it, and also to celebrate what's unique to you. You don't have to try to copy another artist style or have to compare yourself to someone else. Let your work be unique, and let your heritage and background really come through what you create.
That's great.
Because we've talked about a number of different themes, particularly with the environmentalism and the reclamation and the restoration that we look forward to as people who believe in Christ. For your wide audience, what do you hope they leave with after kind of looking at and contemplating the works in this series?
I think for me, I hope to provide, and this is kind of the tagline, streams of hope within a post-apocalyptic wasteland that we often are finding ourselves in. Like I said, not coming from a place of guilt, but really inspiring hope. This book is for nature lovers, for art enthusiasts, but anyone who wants to also think deeply about our relationship with the world, and really a coherent worldview behind ecological ethics. But also, I hope this book can be something that people can enjoy for years to come. And the music and the art part of the sales of each copy will be donated to conservation organizations. And I really hope that this can inspire practical change. In the book, there's also a list of conservation resources that people can look into if they're interested.
Amazing.
That's fantastic.
Josh, we appreciate your time and just sharing your thoughts and your heart behind your work here. But when you take off the associate living master cape and just our Josh, the young guy, what are some of the things that you're enjoying now, in whether it's books or art or music, things like that? What's something that you've enjoyed and you just want to shout out?
Wow. I love playing ping pong, basketball. I also am really into disc golfing. I don't know if any of you
Yeah.
guys have disc golfed. So that's something I enjoy. But yeah, trying to live a well-rounded life and get out of the studio and go on hikes and all that sort of thing. And disc golfing helps with that. So there's my shout out.
Are there any books or podcasts or movies or TV shows that you also enjoy in your free time?
Let me think. What I read a variety of books on so many different topics. It's hard to pick one specifically. Reading right now, Stephen Bauman Prediger's book, Earth Keeping and Character. And it's really talking about like the virtues of wisdom, and I'm going to kind of I'm kind of developing some of these ideas for my next painting series. Um, but yeah, I enjoy another book I'm reading right now, Eternity in Their Hearts by Don Richardson. Really powerful book.
My father-in-law loves that one.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Yeah. Anything else I have really to shout out? But
That's good.
I was going to ask, just because of your particular skill in this area, for anyone like we've already mentioned who is in the art world, you mentioned like knowing the business of art and like how like being able to navigate that. Are there any resources you would point someone to who like maybe is like, man, I love sketching in my sketchbook and I'm like would dream of like painting and doing those things, but like really they just don't know where to get started on just that business aspect and some of that functional stuff that'll help sustain them? I wondered if there was any resources you could shout out for someone like that.
well, I've had to kind of make it up as I've gone. So
It's perfect kind of knowledge. Self-learned.
if I'm honest, and so I've been mentored under various artists over the years, and just have asked a lot of questions and gotten helpful feedback that way. Especially also like gallery owners, just picking their brains of various ways to go. I would just recommend there are some resources for artists out there, but the challenge is you really want to find someone who's in a similar field to you. Like if you're an illustrator, photographer, or painter, there's going to be very, very different paths. And so find an artist who is of a similar style to you, a similar medium of art, and just take a look at their website, see what, in the case of an artist, what exhibitions they're doing, what galleries they're showing with. Did they go to school? Did they not go to school? How do they connect with their audience? Do they have a newsletter, social media presence? And also, ultimately, you really need to have a good rapport with your collectors and with the press. So there's a lot of things that the art world has changed, where in the past artists kind of left everything to the galleries to do, but nowadays artists are more independent, and so can do a lot more themselves and are expected to do that. So I would say don't wait around until you get the big solo exhibition to create your best work. Like just start creating your best work right now, and of course network as you go, become friends with artists, and specifically, like if you're an artist of faith and you're wanting to enter the art world, I really encourage you to get to know artists in your community. Go out to gallery exhibition openings and follow artists you love on social media. I think that's a really important part, that we actually engage and that we learn from non-Christian artists, because there's some incredibly talented artists. I know I've benefited from people, and so not just kind of staying within your Christian bubble, because there's a lot of excellent work being created right now that we would miss out on.
There you
Man,
go. Get out of that bubble.
That
There
is
you go.
that is
All
going
right,
to be some
Josh.
helpful stuff from somebody. Thank you so much for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
You
Definitely.
mentioned newsletters and social media. Josh, where can folks follow you if they're interested? And they
Yeah.
should be.
So you can check out my website, joshtiessen.com, and my Instagram at joshtiessen, which is the same handle on Twitter and Facebook. And feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. I'm always an open book and love encouraging fellow artists, or if you're interested purchasing work. The book and CD, Streams of the Wasteland, they're available through my website in the gallery edition and collector's edition format, which comes with also a concept sketch, and it's also available on Amazon if you're used to that platform more.
Really wonderful.
Yeah.
This will be for the supporters one day when we get the video going, but it's really wonderful.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing this Streams in the Wasteland releases August 1st. So we either already at the time that this posts or within probably not many days.
Terrific.
Well, Josh, thank you for your time. I love this work. This is something that I can guarantee you I will be looking at for years to come. My son is a big fan of the butterflies. As you got to see him for a second before we recorded here, I'm sure that this will have many good conversations from this. So I look forward to hearing, just kind of following your site and your feeds and kind of seeing the conversations that you get to start with folks.
Yeah. Thank you so much for just hosting this podcast too. I've listened to several of your episodes, and I just love that you're creating this space to have, such substantive conversations, because, the arts have just this great potential that they're way more than just, entertainment. And I feel like, what I do through my art, I really resonate with what you guys are doing on the podcast. So thank you so much.
Man,
thanks, man. We appreciate that.
We really appreciate that endorsement. Absolutely.
For sure.
All right. Well, Josh, what a great conversation. I know in that vein, we are definitely getting some substantive things here. And we appreciate you coming on. Have a great evening.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
So, everybody, that was Josh Tiessen, the fine artist, the associate living master himself, author
That's
of
such a wild
James
title.
and the Wasteland. Man, what a fun conversation! What a cool guy.
That was excellent. We should have more. It's so hard. I mean, listeners maybe might not understand. Like, we get so excited whenever we do any of our episodes with our guests. We're like, oh, we should do more movies. We should do more books. We should do more different types of interviews with different people. But we can only do 4 a month. And we got our topic toss-ups and our reflects that we're trying to work through.
Yeah.
So, like, we can only do 1 or 2 of these like special ones a month. So our list is full of some really good stuff here.
Yeah. So stay tuned.
So in the age of 100 million streaming services and 2 million different podcasts out there, supporting shows you like and appreciate is very important. At Substance here, there are 2 main ways that you can do that. We are still working on our 21 in 21 campaign. We'd love to get 21 or more $5 or higher supporters a month. You can do that at the Anchor link in our show notes, or if monthly support is kind of not your style, it just doesn't work for you or your budget or what have you, you can give us individual donations at Cash App at $the Substance Pod. You can make that as large or small as possible. And we appreciate every dollar that comes in. We're growing. We're getting our website almost up and running. Got some ideas for some t-shirts and merch. So the more you support, the quicker we can do that and continue to bring you some great content.
And as we continue our Bless Your Timeline segment, go ahead and bless your timeline by following The Substance. Our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram is The Substance Pod. There, you definitely want to follow after this episode, because we might be able to show a few of the pieces that Josh Tiessen has done.
I forgot. This was so long ago. I connected with him like in January or February.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure that we can give one of these away. I need to follow up with that, but I'm pretty sure we got one of these to give away.
Okay, so you got to be
Wow.
following.
This
You
is a
have to
heck
be
of this
following.
is a $75
This
gallery edition art book.
This is the
Yeah.
giveaway right here that you're like getting the announcement fresh. If you're
Right.
the folks, see, we reward the folks who
I
hang
forgot
on.
about that.
If you hang on to the
Yeah, if
end,
you listen to the end.
you get the good
Right.
stuff.
So
Also
you,
tweet at us. Hey, I'm listening to the end.
yeah, let us know on Twitter that you're listening to the end, and you have to be following us in order to get that giveaway. So follow us on our socials, and there you'll also be able to interact with us in the comments section and just know what we're getting up to. So follow us on the socials.
And the real listeners at the end also know to send us an email at the substancepod@gmail.com. And if you really get all the way through, you might find some bonus audio sometimes. So why don't you go ahead and pop open that email app and tell us what your favorite bonus audio segment has been. And if you haven't heard enough, go back through the archive, check out the last few minutes.
Kina Aragon's episode is the only one you guys need to listen to. That's where you all need to start at. That's where it stops and stops. We got some really good ones, but that's my favorite. Still.
Yeah, and if you just start getting into an uncontrollable fit of laughter, you can go ahead and call our audio line 913-703-3883. And just go ahead and leave a voice note of your just guffaws and laughing at how crazy some of these bonus segments are. And that should pretty much tide you over if you do that all the way till next week when we will see you again
on The Substance.
Peace.
But yeah, Trevor, I'm just curious, like, do you guys like have like a background in like theology or seminary?
Yeah. Also, like, I'm kind of a born Bible nerd a little bit, which is both a strength and a weakness. I have to watch out for the liabilities there. When I have my mom found this like Easter quiz, like Bible quiz I handed out to my relatives when I was 7.
That you created.
Wow.
Yes, I quizzed them on Easter related things. I was like, man, this is actually a pretty good quiz. Pretty funny.
That's good.